Can reality really be described? Reality can be described in many different ways. That's the point. It can never be described in a way that is like the way to describe reality, but it can be described in many different ways. Many of those ways can feel intuitive and feel certain and feel compelling to other people. Aren't all concepts an enclosed system? What do we mean by enclosed? So this is where Hegel's notion of determinate is really cool. He points out that concepts are determined, right? Like there's always this process of experience that determines concepts. And what is actually determining the concepts are its bounds. And the bounds are relations. So like these are determinate relations. Yeah, determinate relations of incompatibility and consequence. Like for Hegel, these categories, these relations, are actually setting the bounds. Like this is enclosing the system. You can imagine that these relations, like we can only conceptualize these relations, and we could try to imagine all the relations, but we're never gonna be able to think about all the relations. So they're theoretically enclosed. A cat is an animal. Like that relation constitutes both the cat and the animal, the concept of the cat and the concept of the animal. Because of that relationship connecting both of them, that's affecting their determinate edges. And you can imagine that a single concept, like a writing utensil, a pen, is connected to so many other different concepts, and that's affecting the bounds of what a pen is. You know, this is all theoretical though. Like it's not like these relations actually exist. This is an exercise in making sense of the contents of our understanding. Like the big point that we try to make here is the dynamic nature of these concepts. So the very bounds, even if they're enclosed in the sense that they're determinate, that it has these determinate edges, these bounds are constantly shifting. They're changing relations with different things. You're discovering new relations. Even if they're enclosed by form, that doesn't mean that they're static. Concepts can only be defined by other concepts. No, that's the big thing with the relations. It's like concepts become defined by their connections to other concepts. Once again, this is theoretical. Like the sentence that concepts can only be defined by other concepts isn't some truism about the world objectively. It's something that we both agree upon, given what we understand. Like given our conceptual understandings, that sentence is not only allowed, but it is necessary. It's the nice thing about always connecting this stuff back to necessity, possibility, and impossibility. What we can say, what we must say, what we cannot say. We could think about this as incompatibility or consequence. Given this one thing that we say, therefore this other thing cannot be said, or this other thing must be said. But aren't you assuming a thing called a cat exists and then making it a concept and referencing other concepts? Right, at the end of the day, like all that concepts are, like most fundamentally, are recognition. Like it's just pattern recognition, whether the stimulus is seeing something or it's thinking about a specific word or a specific thing. Who knows what that actual prompt is? And then we have that experience, and that experience isn't simple. It's very much embodied and holistic. Yeah, once again, concepts, the idea of a concept is very elusive. It's almost unintelligible to like imagine what a singular concept is in our experience. Like we're only given an experience that has concepts connected to each other, concepts that already exist. That was the nice thing about starting out with a Heideggerian discussion of meaning. The world arrives already intelligible and significant, filled with things that matter to us in ways that are often immediate and intuitive. So the cat already exists here. We do have this problem where like we start with the cat existing, but that's just an aspect of how our brain works, how we experience what the contents of the world. There's no getting around that. Like it's very difficult to like explain our understanding or our experience. If we had no word for animal, would the concept of cats still exist? It would be difficult to have no word for animal and still have a concept for animal, right? Like what would that even mean? So if we didn't have a concept for an animal, then it would be difficult to consider whether we'd have a similar concept about cats, right? We can only imagine what we would think a cat is if we didn't understand the concept of an animal. I think the concept of cat is purely a mental thing, right? I agree. Patterns among other concepts, no, enclosed. I mean, all these things are mental, right? I'm trying to point out that we're getting away from that Platonic view where a cat is a thing that's separate. The really important thing when we're starting to talk about the physical world, and one of the reasons why we can make sense of the physical world in a way that really makes sense with the rest of our conceptual experience, is given that we learn based on stimuli, whether that is external stimuli or internal stimuli, whether that is the brute non-living physical world or if that's the living social humans within it. Like, these things are constraints that affects the trajectory of what we believe to be true. Like, it affects our learning. Like, regardless of what I think about a cliff, if I try walking off that cliff, I will die. So the people that, on one hand, we could think about it in a Darwinian way where certain types of thoughts do just get you killed. And then also we could think about it in a way where, like, regardless of what I think about what should be allowed in a social encounter, if I go into a social group and I try that and they don't like it, then that's going to end up negatively affecting my experience in such a way that, remember, the experience isn't the only thing that's happening, but also, the trajectory of my learning is happening in tandem with this experience, this unpleasant experience. So I will probably get some trauma or maybe hopefully internalize that I shouldn't do that in the future, right? Like, this is affecting how I learn about what is true. Remember, like, we try to make what is semantically true and what is normative, like, hand in hand here. Like, we end up thinking that it's semantic, but really what's going on is we're being conditioned to think certain things. That's why, like, when I always point out, when we're young, like, our teachers or our parents will point at something and tell us what it is, and they're really telling us a rule, like, this is, like, when you see this, that's what this thing is. That, like, right there, that is the letter A. When you see that is the letter A. That's a rule. It's not like they're giving you what's true and, like, you're putting a true fact into your brain now. Like, they could have said that any letter was the letter A and you would have believed them, and that would have significantly affected your understanding going forward. Yeah. We have to, unfortunately, think about all this stuff. This is a very difficult stuff, given that it's so unintuitive, and that's what we're up against. Yeah, like, what Bernardo Kastrup has on his side is that his philosophy is so damn intuitive, which is really effective. We do not have an intuitive philosophy on our side here, except for when we start looking at the science. When you start looking at the science and you have some conceptual understanding of the value and or authority of science, then that can lead you to an understanding that makes sense of the very paradox of how our own thoughts are making sense of the science that's telling us how our own thoughts are changing. If we called all animals animal, would the concept of individual animals still exist? Yes. Like, the concept of, like, when we're talking about concepts, we're not just talking about the words, like, or even the explicit meaning that arises when we think about something. Like, we're talking about all the aspects of our experience, even the stuff that's unconscious. So if we called all animals animals, we would still consider that the concept of an individual animal includes some sort of stimulus that allows you to distinguish between the two, and not just the stimulus, but, like, also the feeling that you get when you see it. So you would still have a different feeling when you saw a cute dog than when you saw a bear out in the woods. Like, you would still have a different experience. And once again, concepts, this is like a theoretical way we can conceptualize our experience and our understanding, but you would end up having a different understanding and experience of that bear than the cute dog. Yeah, we're just leveraging this idea of concept, one, because it's quite intuitive, two, because we get to leverage all the cool stuff from Hegel land, but it's not like concepts are this thing that exists. It's a pragmatic linguistic tool that we can leverage. I remember a street interview where the interviewer asked someone what 2 + 2 was, and he said that doesn't exist. It's not a number. So yeah, like, we could think about this stuff pragmatically. For someone to say that, like, they're doing something inappropriate, in, like, not in like a true sense, but just in like a very intuitive, like, why are you playing by a different set of rules right now? Like, same with the best example I always try to bring up is, like, when we're talking about base level philosophy, then we have to point out that truth is this very dynamic thing that's very personal and subjective for each person, and we can only make sense of the truth that we feel like is true, like an objective truth about the physical world and whatnot, when we consider that each of us affect the understanding of each other in such a way that we arrive at these pragmatically similar understandings. And obviously there's a lot of stuff going on here where different levels of authority or, like a textbook has, some sway over what a teacher is going to think and how the teacher is going to then tell the student whether or not they're wrong or not, or give them points, and the kid wants points because the parents are going to be upset if the kid doesn't get the points. There's a lot of constraints on us that's affecting what we believe. So back to what I was saying is, if we're out in an academic setting, I'm not going to act as if truth is some subjective dynamic thing. I'm going to talk about truth as the way that they understand truth. That's the pragmatic aspect of communication. Like when we're talking to people that we know have a certain understanding, we might as well leverage that understanding and abide by it, even if we have some other understanding. At some point, who cares about the semantics? What we're trying to convey is just some information. And it's not like I'm going to die on a hill that anyone ought to use a word in a certain way in every single context. Sometimes meditators will whip out that things don't exist as a way of dismissing them, and they omit that they mean that it doesn't exist to the extent that nothing exists. Right. So yeah, this is the other thing that we have to be really mindful of, and this is something that we're, in a very nice way, we're able to really stress because of the type of philosophy we're talking about. Is when we say things, that is going to be inferred by many different people, and what we say might be ambiguous. And in fact, like, what we say is always going to be ambiguous to some extent because people have different understandings. So they're going to understand what we say in different ways. Even when I talk about a cat, we're all getting a slightly different experience of what I'm saying there. So what we can do to really hedge our bets in some sense when we're trying to communicate is to be as precise as we think we need to be given the group that we're with. And that's going to be a challenge for me, because, you know, in theory, the viewership here could be as varied as can be. So I really need to be mindful of that. I need to try to make sure that I explain things in ways that anyone could follow, and not just someone who's versed in analytic idealism or certain facets of science. And I probably fail every single day, but, you know, given the goal of trying to communicate a certain thing, what ought you, how precise ought you say what you're trying to say, such that you reduce the risk of other people taking away with it a different intention or meaning than you intended.